is an attack or series of attacks by a nation or institution with the intention of disrupting, damaging, or destabilizing its critical systems. Depending on the severity of the attack, they have the potential to critically damage government or civilian lives and infrastructure. Cyber warfare attacks can take different forms, including espionage to monitor other countries, to steal secrets, and attacking computer networks of economic establishments to steal money or block people from accessing funds. Others, such as critical power grid attacks, can have detrimental consequences, which can lead to critical damage and infrastructure or even bodily harm. During the Bush and Obama administration, tensions between the US, Israel, and Iran were high as the US and Israel tried to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons because they believed Israel would launch airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities and would set off a regional war. To derail the Iranian nuclear program, the US and Israel created the Stuxnet worm. Stuxnet worked by infecting the Iranian nuclear facility through a USB. The worm's code first spied on the systems and stored computer data. Then it used the information it gathered to take control of the nuclear centrifuges, making them spin themselves to failure, while it provided false feedback so operators couldn't understand what was failing.
An immediate result of Stuxnet towards Iran was it reportedly ruined 1/5 of their nuclear centrifuges. In terms of Iran's industrial control system, the worm infected over 200,000 computers and caused 1,000 machines to physically deteriorate. Siemens also released a detection and removal tool for Stuxnet. In terms of legal action against Stuxnet, neither US or Israel have admitted that they were responsible. However, those invited by NATO to create the Italian manual, which applies standards of international law to cyber warfare, have agreed that Stuxnet was likely illegal since the US was not acting in self-defense towards Iran when it was deployed. But some argue that it was anticipatory self-defense. Stuxnet presents an interesting case of cyber warfare and ethics. During warfare, we must consider proportionality and discrimination. For proportionality, the suffering and damage caused by Stuxnet cannot outweigh the harm that prompted it. Technically, for Stuxnet, it did not harm or kill anyone. However, the nuclear weapons that Iran was creating could have killed millions. In terms of discrimination, Stuxnet seems perfectly indiscriminate. This worm infected not just targets Iran, but also thousands of other computers around the world that were not connected to Iran. Some would argue that this is unethical since it's infecting computers of innocent bystanders. However, this is not a worry since this worm was designed to only cause harm to intended targets.
In another example of a cyber attack, Pecha is a family of malware targeting Windows operating systems. It encrypts the hard drive's files and prevents Windows from booting. It then requests a payment in Bitcoin to regain access to the system. This malware makes your files inaccessible, and the image shown is what is displayed on the original version of Pecha. In 2017, there was a massive cyber attack on Ukraine using a modified version of Pecha known as NotPetya. This attack wiped data from the computers of banks, energy firms, senior government officials, and the airport in Kiev, thus crippling the Ukrainian nation. Russia is largely viewed as responsible for this attack, and the attack was only halted by creating a file perfc.dat on computers now already affected on the attack. NotPetya is considered to be the most destructive cyber attack ever. It affected mostly Ukraine, but also other countries such as Germany. The US stated that the monetary damages of NotPetya could be upwards of $10 billion, and the attack crippled operations of multinational corporations such as FedEx and Merck. The US, UK, and Australian governments all released strongly worded statements blaming Russia for the attacks. 6 Russian intelligence officers attributed with developing the attack were formally charged by the Department of Justice. NATO has since called for a stronger defense between its alliance against cyber attacks, and Russia has denied all accusations about NotPetya's origin.
The cyber attacks of 2017, Pecha, NotPetya, and then later WannaCry all prompted a need for increased cybersecurity and a need for cyber insurance policies. Damage resulting from these attacks was considered an act of war and thus wasn't covered by most insurance providers. This put computer company Mondelez, which lost an estimated $100 million, sending them up against their insurer, Zurich, in a court case that would likely decide the fate of cyber insurance. These attacks led to a rise in research into both resistance to physical but also cyber warfare. Underdeveloped nations can be far more at risk in a world where the cyberspace is becoming a more common battleground. Vast ethical implications are of this if only predominantly white nations have access to means of cyber attack mitigation. In addition, the US Center for Strategic and International Studies started documenting all cyber incidents on domestic soil. A huge fallout of Pecha was increased suspicion, later proven fact that Russia had meddled in the 2020 election and would continue to do so. As such, voting security drastically increased. Furthermore, Elections across the world have been affected by cyber attacks, with 88% of elections from 2018 to 2020 having some level of digital interference. An example of this is in Argentina, where misinformation was spread en masse, with a fact-checking organization being shut down by a distributed denial of service DDoS attack, likely by foreign sources.
In the past year, cyber attacks have proliferated rapidly. Perhaps the best known example of this trend is the Colonial Pipeline breach. On May 7, 2021, criminal hacker group DarkSide used compromised virtual private network credentials, which lacked multi-factor identification, to halt the Colonial Pipeline and disrupt fuel supplies in the process. Thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, cybercrimes are estimated to have increased by a whopping 600% over the past 2 years. Even in the past decade, there's been a steady rise of malware infections, from 12.4 million in 2009 to 812 million in 2018. More than 99% of discovered mobile malware originates from third-party app stores, which provide alternatives to the Android market and App Store. Cyber warfare may seem like something with which people outside of the technology sector need not concern themselves, but this could not be farther from the truth. 2017 Pew Research survey found that a majority of Americans have personally experienced a major data breach. Oddly enough, most Americans continue to ignore cybersecurity best practices. For example, only 12% of internet users report having used password management software. Stuxnet and Pecha are two paragons of an increasing trend of malware and cybersecurity breaches. We considered the social, ethical, and legal ramifications of this trend and how malware impacts those inside the tech industry and outside of it.